Brooklyn's #1 advocate, the next borough president, will be tasked with leading our borough through an economically crippling pandemic and unprecedented loss. The BP's influence on land use, education, and capital investment is critical to Brooklyn's resilience and recovery. That's why this forum, presented by BRIC TV in partnership with the New York City Campaign Finance Board, is happening now. We intend to give Brooklynites the information they need to make their ranked choice on who will be working for us at Borough Hall. And we aren't taking this lightly, and we don't intend to waste any time. The candidates have agreed to a format and rules designed to make sure they all get the opportunity to be heard. There will be 30 seconds of introductory remarks, 1-minute responses to questions, but no rebuttals or interruptions. Any interruptions will actually result in forfeiting 30 seconds from the interrupter's next response. So the candidates have been sequenced tonight in alphabetical order by their last name and will answer each question in the same sequence for the entire evening. Each of the candidates must have been on the ballot as of today and have raised and spent 2.5% of the expenditure limit for borough president as of Friday, May 21st, in compliance with New York City's Campaign Finance Board regulations. So that is the quick introduction, but I would love to bring everyone into the room right now to give you an idea of those vying for the opportunity to be Brooklyn's next borough president. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our community partners who will be providing questions that are vital to their area of interest as well as our borough's vitality. So just a little bit of a getting to know you question, which we've earmarked 30 seconds for your response. Eric Adams walked into the office virtually uncontested for 2 terms as borough president. Now all of a sudden we're faced with so many competent, passionate people, 7 in the room right now. So the question is, why borough president and why now in this very competitive year? And I'm going to ask that by way of introduction to our first candidate, Robert E. Cornegy Jr.
Thank you, Brian. A great question. I chair the city's committee on housing and buildings currently, and I'm the past chair in the last legislative session of the city's committee on small business. And I think that those are the 2 real pivots and shifts on recovery and resiliency that are necessary. So I think I have a unique brand of leadership. I also think that I'm uniquely qualified to lead based on the chairmanships that I've held. I'm on finance, the budget negotiation team. I chair the Democratic Conference. I chair the MWBE Commission. All things that
I believe that is your time, candidate Cornegy. We've got a 30-second timer down there, and you might have heard that ding, so we're going to keep things tight in the service of our voters being informed tonight, but we thank you for that answer. Now we're going to be turning to candidate Council.
Thank you so much. Kim Council, I'm a nonprofit executive, a minister, a law librarian, and a mom of 2. Grew up in Bed-Stuy, the oldest of 5 with lots of love, but the struggle was real. Decades later, people in my neighborhood still face the same struggles. I've worked with community organizations to do the work that government wouldn't or can't, building over 1,000 units of affordable housing, helping small businesses to succeed, opening a health clinic when hospitals started shutting down, and creating violence interrupter programs to combat gun violence in my community. Wow.
Well, 30 seconds is 30 seconds when that clock is running, isn't it? So thank you for that response. I'm looking now to candidate Khari Edwards. Why borough president? Why now?
Spent 20 plus years of my career in public service. I'm the only candidate with borough-wide experience working with 2 governors. I was the former vice president of Brookdale Hospital, the first VP of color in the history of a hospital. But that's where I decided to run because I was working next to union workers who had great pensions, great jobs, who were living in shelters or living in homeless or their cars because they couldn't afford to borrow. And I think it's really just time that we have somebody from on the ground who can really represent our community. So my name is Khari Edwards, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for your response, candidate Edwards. Now, as it's been before, the same question posed to candidate Anthony T. Jones. We're not going to start the clock until you unmute yourself. So this is the grace of the beginning of the debate forum. So the 30 seconds is yours, sir. Why borough
Okay,
president?
thank you. I'm sorry. I'm Anthony T. Jones. I'm the district leader from the 55th Assembly District. And it's not about just now. 2 years ago when I was running for my reelection for district leader, and I got 95% of the vote, never knocked on a door before, and that was based upon my passion. Even now today, as the person who has been chuckling and driving and moving forward to try to get where I am here today, I'm the last guy in the race for Brooklyn Borough President, but here I am now, started from the bottom.
And now he's here, I imagine is what was coming. We're going to turn next for an answer to the question of why Borough President and why now, and I guess specifically, why you, candidate Antonio Reynoso?
Thank you so much. Brooklyn gave me everything, and I'm ready to give everything back to it. My name is Antonio Reynoso. I'm a current council member of the 34th District. I care deeply about building back better and making sure that we have an equitable Brooklyn. My job is to make sure that I put Brooklyn in the center of the universe, which is its rightful place. Thank you.
All right, with 10 seconds to spare, I like where this is going. We're going to turn now to JoAnne Simon. Why Borough President? Why now, candidate Simon?
Thank you. I'm Assemblymember JoAnne Simon, and I just pulled up my folding chair because it's time for Brooklyn to have a woman borough president. I'm a former teacher of deaf children, a community activist, a disability civil rights lawyer, and I've been a solidly progressive and accessible legislator and coalition builder. I grew up in a large working class family. I'm the first in my family to go to college, putting myself to college, grad school, and law school. I'm excited to bring my passion, my skills, and my experience to work for all of Brooklyn. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the final response to the question of why Brooklyn, why now, and why you specifically as Borough President, I'm looking at Lamor Miller Whitehead.
Thank you so much. And the question would be back, why not? I am the bishop of two churches, one in Brooklyn, one in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm also the mentee of our current borough president, Eric L. Adams. My father, Arthur Miller, was the first I Can't Breathe. He was beat and strangled to death by 16 police officers because of the color of my father's skin. So my father was the first I Can't Breathe. George Floyd and Eric Gardner was I Can't Breathe. And when I become the borough president, this will stop. Systemic racism will stop. And I will, thank you.
Thank you for that answer. So now we're going to give you all some much needed time to expound on some answers to a question posed first by Vladimir Sterling. Vladimir is the Senior Director of Policy and Government Affairs at the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, which happens to be one of our title partners for this event. Thank you for partnering with us on this important forum. In addition to being partners with us, the Brooklyn Chamber is also one of the largest and most influential organizations of its kind in the entire state of New York. Vladimir, on to your question.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening. So my question is, small business reopening and survival is going to be key to Brooklyn's economic recovery coming out of the pandemic. Brooklyn is still a small business economy, with over 84% of our 63,000 businesses employing less than 10 people. Hence, what can the borough president do in his or her role to ensure that our small businesses may reopen and recovery effectively?
So effective reopening and recovery for all of those small businesses that keep Brooklyn running. And that question lands with you first, candidate Cornegy. We're waiting for you to get unmuted just there. We'll start your time, your minute right now. Go for it.
Thank you for that question. But the reality is that the Brooklyn Chamber and my office partnered to bring forward the Chamber on the Go program, which actually is a program that takes all of the city services and puts it in an RV fashion so that the city's businesses can have access to capital and technical assistance. In my first 100 days, we have a $10 million fund that's set up for small businesses, not low interest and no interest loans, but actual grants for small businesses to help them build capacity coming out of a pandemic. It has already been stated that 1/3 of our small businesses, especially minority and women-owned businesses, will not be able to return after the pandemic. The relief through access to capital is quintessential. I will have the first corporately funded through the banks $10 million fund access to our small businesses from the Borough President's office. I look forward to doing that in partnership with the Brooklyn Chamber.
Thank you, Candidate Cornegy. Now we're going to turn to Candidate Kim Council. The question, just to reiterate, was what could you do as Borough President to ensure that our businesses reopen and recover effectively?
Very good question. I'm currently the vice chair of the Local Development Corporation of East New York, and we work with a lot of small businesses to help them to get, microloans, financing, business plans, and things of that nature. So as Borough President, I plan on creating a small business resource center to help the small businesses navigate all of the services and the resources that are available to them. As we know, many of our small businesses were not able, they didn't have the capacity to get the PPP. By the time they got this stuff together, the money was gone. And we're also going to create a mobile borough hall to bring those resources to every single community to make sure that they have access to what they need and help with navigating those services.
Thank you for that. We appreciate your response. And now we are going to turn next to Khari Edwards for that question about your response to your capacity as Borough President, making sure that businesses reopen and recover effectively.
Using the platform of the Borough President's office, we have to bridge access to resources. One of the things that we would like to do is really create a dynamic where we can introduce legislation where we could have small businesses get tax breaks for those who aren't meeting the threshold. Secondly, there's something that the city's been sitting on for quite some time called the economically targeted investment. And as Borough President, you're allowed to put an appointee on the public education panel that also sits on the pension board. And what we can do is leverage that investment from the New York State pension to supply small businesses with what could be close to a $2 billion annual budget of creating job opportunities, which is really targeted for small business and workforce housing.
All right, thank you for that answer, candidate. Now we are going to be turning to candidate Anthony T. Jones for the question about small business recovery, reopening. And I see that you're getting unmuted over there. Looking forward to your answer.
First of all, it's important for us to understand that we are moving out of COVID-19 and the pandemic era. However, we are not there totally just yet. But as the next Borough President of Brooklyn, I want to make sure that we educate our business owners about the resources that are available to them, because even to this day, a lot of businesses, small businesses, still don't know about the small loans and the different resources that are available to them. So I have to make sure that as Borough President, we merge them with the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, who's responsible for different types of things in terms of educating small businesses. But we want to make sure that we still go into the whole idea of opening with caution, because even though the businesses may be open and get money, but if the people are still afraid to come out, then business can't grow. So we have to ensure that people feel safe, and let's get the business the money that they need in order to continue to do business and grow.
All right, thank you for that. I'm sure we're going to get into some of those issues of growth and safety and public safety as we move on a little bit further into the forum. But right now, it is the opportunity for candidate Antonio Reynoso to answer that question about the Borough President's role in ensuring that small businesses reopen and recover effectively.
My record speaks for itself. I'm not going to talk to you only about what I will do, but I'm going to talk to you about what I've already done. I was able to pass the outdoor dining legislation, which saved 100,000 jobs and countless businesses from Brooklyn. It's this thoughtful and creative leadership that we need in the borough office and borough hall, so that we can actually find solutions to the problems we have. When it comes to COVID recovery, what I want to do is have a one-stop recovery shop in Brooklyn Borough Hall that's going to allow for us to have a conversation with businesses that have been left behind to the institutions that currently exist in our city. We want to make sure we can get the PPP loans and that our businesses are the ones that are thriving and that are receiving those resources. If we allow for the same people to do the same work, we won't be successful. I'm looking to be the borough president that can build a Brooklyn for all of us, and looking forward to doing that come 2022.
Come June 22nd, we got that in there. That's when we expect to see you all at the polls, if not a moment before, during early voting. But still someone who's vying for that #1 position on your ranked choice voting ballot. So we'd love to hear your ideas, candidate Simon, on ensuring that our small businesses reopen and recover effectively.
Thank you very much, Brian. You know, our small businesses are the primary generator of jobs in our borough. They provide so much to our communities. They are part of our safety net in our communities. And they are also the place where the jobs of the future are going to be created. And so, #1, we have to work with the various organizations, the informal organizations, the BIDs, the merchant associations, the groupings that people have come up with during COVID to help each other out, much like the mutual aid groups, but also work on those industries of the future, such as green economy and the Marijuana Regulation and Tax Act, which I was proud to be a prime sponsor of, which will create a whole new industry that will bring jobs to the communities, and particularly to communities that have been disproportionately affected by the criminalization of marijuana.
All right, thank you for that response, candidate Simon. And now for the final take on just what a borough president can do to ensure that our small business community can reopen and recover effectively, to you, candidate Whitehead.
Thank you so much. I'm the candidate that's not going to give you the politically correct response that all the other candidates is going to give you. I'm going to be the voice for the voiceless. What I have already raised, if you watch and if you look at all of my endorsements, there are $1 million influences from the industry. And I've already raised $50 million to go towards a nonprofit fund that I'm going to create as the Brooklyn Borough President. And I'm going to give this to small businesses because at the end of the day, it's about cash in hand. We can definitely negotiate about the taxes and we can talk about bringing the people out. But at the end of the day, we have to restore our community by bringing money into play. I'm not going to deal with banks with the grants because small businesses get caught up with the debacle of going back and forth with the grants and the PPP. We're not doing none of that. I've already raised it, and all I have to do is create a structure. Thank you.
So you got $50 million waiting for a structure to pass out to businesses. All right, take note there. So we are going to go into our second question of the night from a partner in the community, but we're actually talking to someone who's a partner right in the very building where I'm standing. Isabel Alcantara is an associate producer at BRIC TV, one of Brooklyn's leading, and dare I say, New York City and the world's cultural institutions. So Isabel, the floor is yours. What's your question?
Thanks, Brian. My question is, to fortify and grow the creative sector and expand access to Brooklynites of all incomes and ethnicities, the borough must first and foremost treat the sector as the economic engine and resource that it is, and at the same time tackle the challenges of making the borough more secure and affordable for creative workers. What policies will you create and/or investments will you make that will reinforce the roles of arts and culture as core to Brooklyn economic vibrancy?
So candidate Cornegy, we're going to you first, looking for a response to what investments you'd make or things that you would create to make sure that the arts and cultures are seen as the economic engine that they are and receive sufficient support.
I will answer that like another candidate has answered that. The work that I've done around that, I have the only ambassador and director to arts and culture in any city council office. And we put that in place because we understood the value of arts and culture, and we wanted to make sure that the resources were available and are prioritized to undergird that. Currently, I'm working with HPD to create an artist colony, which is a building that houses artists at below market rents, and in the commercial space below, collectively uses that space to put on concerts, to have art galleries. There's a precedent for that to set around the country. I want this borough, my district in particular that I serve now, to be the first to be able to create an artist colony that has affordable housing. In the borough of Brooklyn, we know for a fact that most of our creatives, this is where they live, this is where they work, this is where they worship, this is where they play. So creating a system that allows them to live affordably in this borough and continue to give back.
All right, we appreciate that. We'll all continue to give back, and we're going to be listening now for the plan that candidate council has, policy or plan or investments that you'd like to make to reinforce the role of arts and cultures as core to Brooklyn's economic vibrancy.
Well, one of the things that I plan on creating as borough president is a hidden treasures tour. There are a lot of arts and institutions to study, to see throughout the borough. So we want to create. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. We want to create an event that will, that will allow people to go and celebrate all of those different things. But we also want to make sure, again, with the Small Business Resource Center, that we're supporting those organizations and those entities. We also have a movement in East New York to create a community land trust. And I think that we should think about this as an option and a viable option to create affordability around housing for that industry.
Thank you. We appreciate that response. Now we're going to turn to you, candidate Edwards. Arts, vibrancy, cultural currency, but economic engine.
Well, the first thing we do have to talk about is the affordability. When Dumbo was the art central of Brooklyn, they got priced out. When Bushwick was becoming the art central of Brooklyn, we got priced out. And I think we do have to protect the affordability metrics specifically around the artist in that way. But also this past Saturday, Park Slope had something like an art crawl. And what I want to do is kind of retake that and use vacant spaces to create these art installations, these art movements, where we can have the community come, express, and donate and really create an economic engine. And the last part about it is I need to use the resources of Borough Hall to protect the investments of artists and use capital funding either to protect them in that way or discretionary funding to support any type of art programs.
Thank you for that. So the same question is going to fall now to you, candidate Jones. What policies would you create or investments you'd like to make to reinforce the role of arts and cultures as core, not only to the way we live, but as economically viable?
Well, one of the things when I become Brooklyn Borough President, I'm going to piggyback off of some of the things that the legend Marty Markowitz did. And I want to make Brooklyn one of the hubs, the tourist hub. We have so many landmarks in Brooklyn. We have so many beautiful areas in Brooklyn. We have multi-cultural restaurants in Brooklyn. I want to make this a tourist hub and invite people from all over the world to show them how we interact and the great things that we have here in Brooklyn, which was going to create jobs. It's going to bring business to the other question that you talked about, how the business get back on track after COVID. That's what I'm going to do, make Brooklyn a tourist hub so that we can create jobs in Brooklyn through tourism.
All right, we'll take everybody's money.
That's right.
Going to turn now to candidate Antonio Reynoso for your question about the arts and culture and how they are key to economic vibrancy.
It is about the money. Look, let's be perfectly honest. Artists in Brooklyn that struggle mostly because of space and an inability to have it. What I want to do is use the funding that is awarded to us through the city of New York to have a non-for-profit acquisition fund using for $60 to $70 million to be able to actually purchase and acquire the property in which they do work, can give access to space that is just not viable or present in a lot of these artists' lives right now. Artists spend more than half of their money just finding space to be able to produce their talent or show their art. I want to change that with this neighborhood, with this acquisition fund that we're looking to build in the borough president's office. I also think that we need to work on permitting. The permitting for space or to use the open streets should be free and easy, and folks can also use that to display their talent and art here in Brooklyn.
Thank you, candidate Reynoso. We're turning now to candidate Simon for your response to policies you'd create, investments you'd make to reinforce that role of arts and culture.
Well, thank you. One of the things we need to do is get creative and serious about the use of capital dollars. So, for example, one of the things that I know many arts and cultural organizations need is money for the internet. They need money for their websites. You can't run a cultural organization without a website, and I believe that should be capital. That is something that we could be able to then direct that capital funding to from the borough president's office to support to also engage, experts to work with people to help them build that network out. And to provide additional funds for them. I'm very proud that in our $1 billion that we provided in state grants and tax credits this year in our budget, we squared away $50 million for the arts community, specifically to address the issues that they raised. And I will continue to advocate for that with the state legislature as well as with our federal government.
All right, now we're going to turn to candidate Whitehead. You had $50 million earmarked for the small business. What are your plans for helping out the arts community so they can remain and drive that economic vibrancy?
Well, like I said before, if you look at my endorsements, they're all people of arts and culture, celebrities, actors, actresses, musicians. And one of the things that I'm going to do as the president, I'm never going to let anyone control my narrative. And as you hear the other candidates, they're talking about what's in discretionary funds. But why? I was on a conversation with Akon, the rapper, and I was asking him, how can we bring the African community to Brooklyn, right? How can they bring their money to us to create a culture? And one of the reasons why we failed doing arts and culture is because we left Brownsville, East New York, Crown Heights. We left the Black and brown communities out of the question. And I'm not going to be the borough president that's going to leave anybody behind. We just have to produce a system so therefore we can create a diverse art and culture society in Brooklyn.
All right, thank you for that response. Now we are going to shift a little bit with a new question from a person who happens to be the newly installed president of Medgar Evers College. You know, Medgar Evers is Brooklyn's community college, 50 years and going. We're happy that you celebrated that 50 last year. Looking forward to so much more to come out of Brooklyn's community college. The floor is yours, Dr. Ramsey.
Well, thank you. The office of the Brooklyn Borough President has been supportive of Medgar Evers College over the years. Medgar Evers College is a precious community jewel that needs ongoing support. 76% of Medgar Evers students are residents of the borough of Brooklyn. And therefore, most of them have come out of schools in the borough of Brooklyn. A number of these students are marginalized, resulting in homelessness, housing instability, and food insecurity. A number of marginalized students view a higher education degree as a stepping stone out of poverty. However, these circumstances have led to withdrawal from classes, low GPA, mental and physical health challenges. Medgar Evers College established a unit, the Transition Academy, to assist marginalized students whose essential needs are not being met. However, we are resource challenged and need financial support to assist these students. Can you please describe a plan by which you would provide support to the college to assist these students, your students? Thank
Our
you.
students, 76%. You heard Dr. Ramsey there. So 76% of those students come from Brooklyn, and nothing is happening in a vacuum. They're seeing their education as a stepping stone. So candidate Cornegy, beginning with you, describe a plan by which you provide support to the college. Unmute for a second there. We're going to hold your time. It's a Zoom age, right? This happens every day, all the time. So please.
So first of all, we have the largest bully pulpit coupled with our capital and discretionary funding. I've been around long enough to have been in on a lot of the capital requests and asks from prior administrations, and have been very happy to support the moves of expanding the campus and making it and beautifying it. To me, Medgar Evers is our local HBCU, or historically Black college and university, and should be treated as such, as the gem that it is. So creating pipelines for discretionary and capital funding to grow that institution is a priority for me. That's my plan. It's been my plan. I've worked with the growth and development of Medgar As beautiful as it is now, I remember when there were only a couple of buildings on that campus, have been also responsible for the zoning and planning as a council member to the ancillary district to work forward to get it where it is. I think that just making sure that we commit those resources and funding in partnership with the local leaders.
All right, thank you for that response. So I'm looking at candidate council right now to make sure that you can be heard on the subject of a plan. Support the Transition Academy. What are you going to do?
Well, I mean, I definitely agree with Councilmember Cornegy that we definitely need to allocate capital funds and discretionary funds for that. I sit on I'm the regional representative for the HBCU International Task Force of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and proud to have pushed to have Medgar Evers College receive an endowment from that fund. We pledged to raise $10 million and have set aside thousands of dollars to set up those types of scholarships for colleges. But the other thing that we need to do is to work with other organizations and community-based organizations, members of the Divine Nine, in order to create a sustainable plan to create some income that will help that program. And so again, it's the bully pulpit, it's the capital funding, it's the discretionary funding, it's using our resources, whatever it takes, in order to make sure that we're able to support those individuals who are our future, knowing that education is the great equalizer, and that is the thing that will help them to level the playing field of our resources.
Thank you, candidate council. I see you there, Alpha Kappa Alpha. I see it in your color scheme. Got it. Now we're going to go on to candidate Edwards. Please describe a plan where you can help support the college.
Well, President Ramsey, welcome to Crown Heights. I've grown up 2 blocks from the school. I've swam in the pool, and I actually started my first community program in your gym, in the Carroll Street gym. So thank you and welcome. First things, I got to put my money where my mouth is. So I'm going to say this publicly. I'm going to commit $100,000 a year to this transitional plan, specifically because I know how many students and how hard it is for students to go to Medgar Evers. Also, I know you had to cut your adult education program, which is also a secondary piece, and I'd like to also help fund that. More importantly, I know that I'd like to expand your current food pantry, which is doing amazing work, but it's also helping to feed those folks, and like to partner that with the Kingsborough Farm, the Kingsborough Community Farm, because that's the necessity piece. And the last thing is, I'd like to really take some of the housing vouchers that we get and set aside for your students, because again, without creating that, we lose.
Thank you for that comprehensive explanation, candidate Edwards. Now we're going to ask you, candidate Jones, how would you intend to provide support to Medgar Evers College? You're unmuted. It's on you.
President Ramsey, I'm probably the only candidate who has actually graduated from Medgar Evers College, and I'm proud of that. When I was 14 years old, I lived on Carroll Street at a boys' group home for years. And I looked across the street and I said, one day I'm going to go to that college. And I did that. And I was involved in student government. So on day one, when I become Brooklyn Borough President, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do it. You're going to come and meet with me at my office and give me my marching orders in terms of what you need and what it needs to take to give it to you and to help the students and Medgar Evers College continue to grow. And that's real talk.
All right. Another proud Medgar graduate. Happy to see it. Now we are looking at candidate Antonio Reynoso. How would you help the college and by extension that 76% of Brooklynites who attend and just the entire student body and populace of Brooklyn?
So extremely proud of the work that Medgar Evers College does and its representation. It's Brooklyn through and through. So President Ramsey, thank you so much for being here. And I think that you will get a universal thank you from every candidate that's running for Brooklyn Borough President. Look, Anthony Jones is absolutely correct. We need to ask the school what its needs are, and we need to do everything we can to give them the resources necessary so that they can thrive. We're not going to have all the answers, but we can ask the questions that are necessary to have real solutions for any of the problems that Medgar Evers might have. And I want to be clear, the Borough President's Office has very limited discretionary funding when it comes to operations. The funding that we do have is capital dollars. So there might be some parts of the institution that might need some help or some rehabilitation that we could take on as borough presidents. And then maybe you can free up some money by not having to do that work and move it to programs that are more vital to your students.
All right, thank you for that response, Candidate Reynoso. Now we're going to turn to you, Candidate Simon. Outline a plan of support for us.
Well, I'm a collaborator. I'm somebody who believes in working with people. And so the first thing I would do is invite President Ramsey to my office to meet, and also the presidents of other colleges in Brooklyn as well. We have 4 CUNY institutions. And CUNY and SUNY, as a state legislator who served on the Higher Education Committee, we have starved SUNY and CUNY of funds for many, many years, particularly in the area of capital and a lot of the support for the equal opportunity programs. We've refunded some of them this year, but we didn't increase them very much. And so really working together to advocate for that type of increase. I've worked at colleges and universities myself as an administrator, and I understand how colleges and universities work. And I would build on those relationships I have at the state level and with the chancellor's office, for example, to work to help provide the kinds of funding that Medgar Evers needs.
All right, thank you for that response. Now our final candidate who gets to weigh in on a plan of support that he can help describe for us in assisting Medgar Evers and maybe by extension some of those other 4 CUNY institutions that were just mentioned.
Well, thank you so much. I grew up in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. I grew up right there on Prospect between Brooklyn and New York, and I learned how to play basketball. And I knew all of the coaches that coached there. Let me say this, as to what I'm going to do different from what all the other candidates said. They are confined to what the original borough president's money is. And if they can't get it done, then it's going to be over and over, excuses after excuses. I'm going to be the president that goes out and get other money from philanthropists and philanthropy. And I'm going to be the one that makes business deals. So therefore, whatever I can give you guys from the office of the borough president is extra. I want to make sure that our children, our education, our college students have stipends, cash in hand. There should be no way they should be struggling with financial aid. The borough of Brooklyn should be able to give some type of funds to college students to better their lives and their careers.
Thank you for that. So we are going to have our next community generated question, and it's going to come from Boris Santos, who is East New York Community Land Trust Board Treasurer. Boris is coming at us from East New York right now, and the land trust out there, just to make a little way of explanation, works to protect, stabilize, expand the stock of affordable homes and locally owned small businesses, as well as the green spaces in East New York and Brownsville. So Boris, the floor is yours. What do you want to know of our next borough president?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. Glad for being here as well. So borough presidents, as has been the chatter so far, are allocated capital funding, right, to appropriate to eligible projects on a discretionary basis. As a member and treasurer of the Community Land Trust, specifically the East New York COT, I'm eager to know how you plan on using your non-city capital funding to help COTs advance their cause of acquiring land, developing on land, and providing affordable community ownership. Do you commit to using non-city capital for funding for COTs like ours in Brooklyn? If so, please elaborate as to how. Thanks.
So that question is going to fall first, as it has for the remainder and the evening, to candidate Cornegy. And I just want to remind you, Boris is the treasurer, so you got to give him some specifics.
So Boris, I'm not sure I understand the question. You're saying not non-city funding, how we intend to use non-city funding?
So capital funding that's for nonprofits, 501c3s, which technically COTs are incorporated, right? So the non-city capital funding part.
I'm sorry, Boris, I still don't understand your question. You're asking me about non-city capital funding? The capital funding that we have is used in a lot of different ways, but it's definitely used. You're saying for nonprofits?
I'm saying the capital funding that doesn't go towards agencies, to parks, to public housing, right? That's considered technically under the guise of the city, non-city capital funding. So how would you use that funding to propel and advance and our movement?
So because I still don't understand the question, I will tell you this. From the city council, I have stood behind and support CLTs. Like, so the legislation that's in front of me, I voted yes on. I believe that community land trusts are what protects us and our ability to grow not only our green spaces. So whatever funding that you're mentioning, I would leverage from the borough president's office to be able to help create and undergird and support CLTs. I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm certainly a staunch supporter of community land trusts. So whatever capital I would use to help support CLTs. I have done it from a discretionary and council standpoint. I would certainly carry that into the borough president's office.
All right, thank you for that clarification and for that response. We're going to go to candidate council right now, and your response, please.
Hey, Boris. I've actually attended a couple of the East New York Community Land Trust meetings and done some community cleanups with that organization. I think they're doing a fantastic job. And I think that what they're trying to do is a model that should be replicated, not just in Brooklyn, across the various neighborhoods and in other boroughs as well. So I would most definitely allocate funding to support that organization. I think we need to look at what the borough president can do, because I believe you have to be in the cycle to have received money from the city council for at least 2 cycles. But we're going to figure out some workarounds in order to make sure you guys get the funding that you need. But I also will be pushing my city council members and the mayor to survey the land that the city owns. We need to find out which agencies own which property. And then we need to begin to have the conversation about how we can get some of that property back into the hands of the community. We know for a fact that we're being priced out of our communities, that developers are coming in and they're building properties that we can't afford to live in. And we've got to do a better job of.
Thank you, candidate council. I'm going to now turn to candidate Edwards to answer the question about committing to use those capital funds for CLTs like the one in East New York.
I mean, Boris, if I understand your question correctly, we're really just talking about how do you support non-city agencies or non-city entities, and really, it's really just identifying those communities, specifically like you guys, Community Land Trust, and investing in them. Also, when I spoke earlier about the public educational panel appointee that sits on the pension board, when we look at how we invest our pension money, we have to look at specifically economically targeted communities who need that support through housing, through community gardens. And like I said, that's an actually investment portfolio that we've ignored for almost 30 years. And that's something that I think we can push to have a great conversation and support you guys in the long term.
All right, we're going to move on now to candidate Anthony T. Jones and your response about your support and elaborating on ways that you think you could use those capital funds to support a community land trust such as the one in East New York.
Well, when I become Brooklyn Borough President, I have attended some of the meetings that the local East New York Local Development Corporation has had in Brownsville. I've known Mr. Boris for quite some time. He's a very active young man, and he's always involved in positive things. So as the next borough president, I would look to support those kind of programs and programs that are like that, because as long as those type of programs are going to educate the people of Brooklyn to prevent land from being taken away from developers, and we're preserving the history of our communities, I'm all for it. Let's make it happen. On day one, Boris, as I told President Ramsey, come on to Borough Hall, let's have a meeting and let's get it done. And you educate me on how I can help so we can move forward to preserve our communities across Brooklyn.
All right, you're going to have yourself a busy day one, sir, from like open to close. I imagine there's going to be a bunch of meetings. So I'm looking at you, candidate Antonio Reynoso. What's your response to committing to use some of those capital funds for CLTs?
Yeah, my non-for-profit acquisition fund is actually modeled to support the community land trust. I actually did it specifically to be able to give money to the community land trust in East New York. So on day one, Boris, the organization would sit with me and we will work out to make sure that you're one of the organizations that receive funding from the Borough President's office. When we talk about capital dollars, the city of New York splits it into two different sectors. The one sector is for agencies like the Department of Education, the Department of Parks, and libraries. But then there's other money called non-city capital that is used for non-for-profits that are not run by agencies. It's a much more arduous and complicated process that I hope to simplify in my office. And this neighborhood non-for-profit acquisition fund is going to be where not only community land trusts, but other non-for-profits could benefit from the city dollars that shouldn't only go exclusively to city agencies. It should go to the community as well. So yes, Boris, the CLT will receive funding under my presidency.
All right, candidate Simon, a response from you about commitment to using non-city capital funds, as explained, to help folks like the East New York CLT.
Well, thank you. I would say that I agree with a number of my colleagues here tonight that we need to use that capital funding for community-based organizations that are going to, in fact, be like the community land trusts, for example, that will make acquisition more available. Part of the problem we have with development is that we're not actually making access to capital easy enough for community-based organizations, for not-for-profit developers. We really should be helping them get access to capital. And that capital may be by working with other organizations, other funding organizations, the CDFIs, for example. It may also be discretionary capital funds from the Borough President's office to help support that.
Thank you. And we're going to turn now for the final response to this question about commitment to non-city capital for CLTs like the one in East New York. Share some of your ideas, candidate Whitehead.
Thanks again. Boris, this is an amazing question. On May 14th, I did a press conference, and one of the things that I stated was the community land trust. Once again, we hear politically answers. Some of the candidates didn't even know what you were talking about. But at the end of the day, I've been doing real estate over 20 years, right? And we have the city giving developers and people with institutions with money, giving developers city land for $1, right? I'm going to be able to put in place the community land trust as a nonprofit to take over of these lands that I would trust the community land trust to develop. What this would do is it will permanently have affordable housing. You guys will be able to police your own money. The rents that come in, you will be able to fund the community through your foundation, through the nonprofit. Yes, I'm going to give you discretionary funds, of course, but we need to make sure that's it.
All right, thank you. I heard a commitment in there for discretionary funds, so we got that before the bell rang. So we're going to mix things up a little, right? We've been here for a good 48 minutes. We'll just shake things out, change the temperature a little with some questions that came in over the transom, just about things that are generally yes or no questions, but we're giving you 30 seconds to expound a little bit. So this is, again, a more quick answer question, but I'm sure your responses will be just as thoughtful to the 1 minute responses that we've been allowed before. So in 30 seconds, starting with candidate Cornegy, are you in favor of increased enforcement of unlicensed street vending that brick and mortar businesses sometimes complain threatens their livelihood and vibrancy? This is a question that came from some members of our business community. So, increased enforcement of unlicensed street vending?
Yes, of course. There's safety issues involved in unlicensed street vending. I would like to see a larger number being licensed, but in the meantime, yes, more enforcement.
So you'd like to see a larger number being licensed. Is there anything in the capacity of borough president that you could do to sort of ease those onerous things that the folks who are street vendors may face in getting a license?
Yeah, absolutely. Working with our city council members to make sure that that's the will of the people, and helping produce legislation in conjunction with local members around increasing the capacity and the number of licensed street vendors is something I've always tried to do. So, yes.
Thank you. So I'm looking at you, candidate counsel. The question was about increased enforcement on unlicensed street vending and as it poses a threat to some in the brick and mortar business community.
Well, I get that it poses a threat to some in the business community, but we got to think Eric Garner was killed selling cigarettes as a result of over enforcement. So we have to balance these things. Definitely, we need to streamline the process so that they can get vendors. And my issue with that is that this disproportionately impacts communities of color. So we have to balance enforcement with how we're treating particular communities. We have to make sure that they're following and in compliance with the law, but we need to streamline the process for the applications for licensing.
Thank you for that response. And we're going to turn now to candidate Edwards. Same question. Enforcement, unlicensed, brick and mortar, there's tension there. Where do you come down on increased enforcement?
Well, I don't agree with increased enforcement because even our brick and mortar went through that in the height of COVID, and it's really created a hard space for many businesses. I would really like to have a conversation and use the platform to expand these permits so that we have real licensed folks doing the work, and so therefore we don't have to really worry about too much between battling between brick and mortar and street vendors. So I really like to increase the street vendor certifications and licenses.
All right, thank you. Candidate Jones, you're walking down the street, there's a street vendor there, there's a brick and mortar business there might be some tension in between. Where are you coming down on increased enforcement?
I think that what we have to understand across the board, that when people are out there building things, they're employed, they have a job, they're making money. Street vendors who are unemployed have to have a ways where they can survive and pay rent and eat. So I'm not for stricter enforcement. And particularly when you look around around Brooklyn, there are a whole lot of vendors who don't have license, but they're not people of color, and nobody's telling them that they can't sell there.
Candidate Reynoso, tell us how you manage this balancing act.
Yeah, look, I'm not in the business of supporting policing of poverty, which is exactly what this would be. These are poor people trying to make a living, and I support anyone trying to chase the American dream and seek opportunity. I think this is more a policy failure than it is an enforcement issue. What we should be doing is building good policy, not enforcement or arresting or fining poor people. And I don't support enforcement. I support better policy and building better legislation, which I will be supportive of.
Candidate Simon, the question is about that tension between unlicensed street vendors and businesses established and brick and mortar trying to do business there. What's your idea of balance?
Well, I don't believe that we need stricter enforcement. I do believe we need a whole lot more empathy and balance in the way we approach these issues from a policy point of view. If we should be giving people access to, streamlined licensing and permitting, if that's what they're wanting to do. But the fact is that these unlicensed street vendors are people who are supporting their families. They're predominantly people of color. They're making a living. They're doing it the hard way, and we should be supporting them wherever we can.
All right, thank you for that response. And for our final response and weigh in on this, if you're in favor of increased enforcement, I'm turning to candidate Whitehead.
Thank you. No way in the world I'm going to enforce of people that cannot afford or don't know the avenues to obtain a license. What I would do as the borough president is I would create a fund, and I would create a task force to go out to see who I can help become a licensed vendor. Right, I would put my money where my mouth is as the borough president to help to answer the why and not to enforce why they don't have.
Thank you for that. So we're going to just go back and transition to our longer form question. 60 seconds here. You each have a full minute to expound on an answer to a question posed by Impact Brooklyn's Executive Director, Bernell Greer. Impact Brooklyn, for those who don't know, is a community development corporation, and they're committed to helping residents build and sustain flourishing communities right here where we are in Fort Greene at BRIC, Clinton Hill, Bedford-Stuyvesant, and Crown Heights, and of course, Prospect Heights. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. New York City has been described as a melting pot and a gorgeous mosaic. However, despite its cultural and ethnic diversity, New York City's residential housing is built on racial discrimination. This is an issue in most communities throughout the country. In fact, New York City is the fourth most segregated city in the country. What power does the borough president have regarding zoning and land use? And how will you use this power to address systemic racism in housing?
Thank you for that question. Now, I've heard each of you individually expound about the ULERP process and some of the things that are broken and you would like to see change, but this is a pointed question asking how, as BP, you would regard zoning and really use it to address those systematic issues that we just heard about. Candidate Cornegy, you have a response.
Absolutely. So a lot has been said about the inability or the lack of teeth in the borough president's office. The actual powers that we have center around the use of zoning, land use, and capital funding. It's that three-leg stool that actually gets us affordability, that actually pushes the envelope as it relates to the NIMBYism that we see in the borough of Brooklyn. A lot of the racist policies are centered around this idea of not in my backyard. The borough president gets to use those zoning and land use powers to actually enforce affordability throughout the borough, and I will continue to do that. I think the racist policies, the redlining, everything that has centralized discrimination and segregation in the borough can be broken down by the use of solid land use and zoning and the use of capital funding to get affordability, to make the entire borough look like it should be and make everybody responsible for affordable housing. Because right now, only affordability is centered in certain.
So the question is, to be clear, about systematic racism in housing and how, as borough president, you would use your powers in zoning and land use to address that, candidate counsel.
I've built affordable housing with nonprofit developers, and so I think we need to see more of that. I think development needs to be community led, and not developer driven. But we've got to work together to make sure that we're rooting out these systemic inequities that exist, not just in housing, but in education and in our healthcare systems. So I would use the bully pulpit. I would use, again, all of the tools in the tool belt in order to make sure that we're drawing attention to these things, that we're bringing communities together, and we're working together to root out these issues within our communities.
Thank you. Candidate Edwards, systematic racism in housing. Borough president's got a few bucks and some land use and zoning pull. How are you going to use it?
Well, the first thing is we have to zone responsibly. If you're in Canarsie, we need to rezone Canarsie so that they'll be out of the flood zone. But if you're in Brownsville, New York, we have to stop rezoning and upzoning, creating more density. What we have to do is really empower our communities with the education of what zoning is, empower our community boards with the real decisions to choose what's important for their community and not what other people say. And we really just have to stop this overdevelopment and stop creating AMIs that are unaffordable for our community members, because that does create the systemic racism and the displacement that does bring in gentrification. And then we're complaining about gentrification when we've already moved out most of our community. So use the borough president's office to really push the envelope on educating what real zoning should be and stop over zoning areas that are really impacted by lack of opportunity, lack of transportation, lack of resources.
Thank you, Candidate Edwards. So, Candidate Jones, we are awaiting your response on the power of the borough president for zoning and land use and how you can use those powers to intercede on behalf of folks who may fall victim to systemic racism in housing.
Well, systemic racism is here. It's been here for hundreds of years. It's not going to leave when I become Brooklyn Borough President. But as the Brooklyn Borough President, it's up to me and it's my responsibility to do the best I can to bring people from across Brooklyn together and try to help people get over their fears and their racism. I believe that every part of the district of community in Brooklyn Brownsville shouldn't look like a war zone, and then Clinton Hills and other parts of the Brooklyn looks like mansions. If we build affordable housing that looks decent in everybody's community, then we don't have to really push affordable housing in areas where people are racist. We don't have to do that, but we have to heal wounds because racism is not going anywhere anytime soon. But we have to make sure that everybody works together.
Thank you for that response. So, Candidate Reynoso, the question was posited on the idea that New York City's residential housing landscape was, predicated on racism and segregation. So how are you using your powers as borough president for zoning and land use going to address that?
Yeah, Ms. Greer is absolutely right. It is a racist system and a racist institution. The ULURP process allows for developers to dictate where they want to build, and they target mostly Black and brown poor communities. And in doing so, insert like mass displacement that is extremely concerning to our communities. What we need to do is empower the voices of the people. We need to give community boards more opportunity to be able to develop plans and dictate what they want their communities to look like. So long as we have a ULURP process that is developer driven, they're going to keep coming into our neighborhoods and target our neighborhoods for development. We need to move away from that and again, move to a community-led process. And we can do that by reforming the community boards and empowering them to tell us where they think growth can happen in a responsible way. Without that, we're going to continue to see the racist development that has existed for hundreds of years here in the city of New York.
So, Candidate Simon, as BP, you would be in the driver's seat. So where are you going to steer us to avoid the pitfalls of this systematic racism in housing?
Well, I thank you for suggesting that the BP is in the driver's seat. The BP has an advisory role in the ULURP process. So here's what I think. Number one, zoning is not planning. What we need is planning. We need not-for-profit development. We need access to capital. And we need to work together to empower communities that are not-for-profit developers to build affordable housing and to build more affordable housing and more deeply affordable housing. Right now, a lot of what gets developed in our borough is as of right. There are no controls there, or it's being done by the state, such as at Atlantic Yard, which really put displacement on steroids in Community Board 6, Community Board 2, 3, and 8. So we need to work together and address this in a fundamentally different way that is community-driven and where we all work together to understand each other's lives and to develop this housing. I live in a neighborhood that was redlined for many, many years. And the reality is the downtown Brooklyn plan and rezoning made my neighborhood much more white.
Thank you for that answer. Now we are turning to Lamor Miller Whitehead for your answer about the BP's power. You got some zoning stuff and land use powers that you can use. How are you going to use it to address systemic racism in housing?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm going to use it to bully developers. And that's how I'm going to use it. I'm going to be the voice for the voiceless. And once again, you hear so many political answers and everybody has an office. We got council, we have assembly, we have district leaders, we have all of this, but nothing has changed yet, right? Same old, same old. At the end of the day, how we strengthen and empower our community is simple. Stop lying. That's it. Right. And at the end of the day, we have to understand if the community board has power, we need to educate them in real estate. We need to educate them in finance. We have to build Brooklyn as people first before we build Brooklyn as a community. And that's where we fail. We have nothing but politicians that are sellouts, and we must stop lying. That's the true and only empowerment.
Thank you for that response. Now, for the final question that is going to be coming from one of our community partners right now, I'd love to introduce you to Nila Natarajan. She is the supervising attorney and policy counsel for Brooklyn Defender Services. And in case you don't know them, Brooklyn Defender Services has been providing family defense practice for many years, and their services are a public defender organization, and they represent nearly 35,000 people every single year who are too poor to afford an attorney. We've invited her here to ask this question.
Thank you so much. The Brooklyn neighborhoods of East New York, Brownsville, Flatbush, and Bed-Stuy, all predominantly Black communities and communities of color, have some of the highest rates of ACS investigations and family separations in the city. We know that most of the allegations made against families by ACS are related to a family's poverty, such as allegations of inadequate housing or inadequate childcare. How would you, as borough president, work to ensure that Brooklyn parents and families receive needed community-based supports and real resources, and ensure that they are protected from ACS overreach and its harmful and unnecessary surveillance?
There's a lot in there, and there's a lot that these families are facing. So 1 minute is just going to give us one inkling as to what you would do as borough president to address some of those things. But please, I invite you to take your time, Council Candidate Cornegy.
So definitely providing for the families what they need in terms of resources so that they can be whole. Making sure the young people in those families have access to good quality programming in school and out of school is one of the quintessential ways to ensure less involvement with ACS. Some of it's poverty, but some of it's also educational that ACS gets involved in. So making sure that families have everything that they need from fighting food insecurity, which we do now from a council perspective, which I'll continue to do from the borough president's office. We work off Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and self-actualization, which is really at the top of the pyramid, comes with love, insecurity, food, shelter, all of those kinds of things. So making sure that families are well-rounded in what their resource needs are is a way to reduce the amount of overreach that ACS is given. We've seen that they have failed miserably with families placing and displacing foster care. We know that some of our young people are in foster care right now.
All right, thank you. As I explained earlier, there was a lot in that question, and we know it's a lot to cram into 1 minute, but I know personally that all of you have websites. I encourage everyone to visit their individual websites and delve a little bit more into each person's policy positions and ideas. But right now, we're going to get to hear yours live, Candidate Council.
That is a very multi-layered question, and all of these questions have been very, very good. So thank you all for the thought that you and care that you put into asking these questions. So here's the thing: we treat these things like they exist in a silo, but they're all interconnected. And the reality is that a lot of the policies that are in place right now are creating this system that feeds into other systems. We continue to put money into programs that help people not to survive and thrive, but that there's an over-enforcement, there's over-policing, there's all of these different things that are happening in our communities. And then we look at them like, why is it that they're acting out? The city council budget last year defunded summer youth employment program, took away money from DYCD. Where your spending priorities are, that shows where your heart is. And so we've got to do a better job of making sure that the people that work for ACS are properly trained, that they have the resources and the tools that they need. But we have to push back on their supervision of those types of situations, and we got to make sure that your organizations and other agencies have bully pulpit money. That's what we're going to do.
Bully pulpit and the money working in conjunction to clear a path there. So I'm looking at you, Candidate Edwards. Do you have a response?
Yes, I mean, we have to eliminate this quota system that deals with police, deals with ACS, and really reimagine ACS as a supportive mechanism and not a policing agency. What we really have to do is we have some great people who are ACS workers. Councilwoman Alika Samuel started out in ACS, a lawyer, a leader, and she quit because basically they wanted her to take somebody's child rather than go into the house, find where the support mechanisms are and report it. So what I would really like to do, and it's universal, is to change ACS's need and the way they have to really go about it and create them more of a support service network other than just a police state. So I think we got to eliminate quotas, and we really have to look at how those particular people can be more of a benefit in supporting families, creating what we call patient-centered medical home, which talk about mental health services, food insecurity, housing access, and utilize those ACS workers as that as that in between.
Thank you, Candidate Edwards. Now we're going to come to you, Candidate Jones, for your response about how you could intercede on behalf of Brooklyn families and their needs.
I think that I'm the only candidate that grew up in Brownsville, born in Brownsville. So what she's talking about, I see that every day. And I believe that we have to change some of the laws, the city council members, the state assembly members. And I don't have to wait until I'm borough president to get this on the roll. I just think that I like to get the other candidate who's offering $50 million and open up a resource center so that we can hire some lawyers and attorneys to make sure that Brownsville get what Brownsville deserves.
Thank you. We appreciate that answer. Now we're going to turn from candidate Jones to Antonio Reynoso. What's your response?
Appreciating my candidate, Anthony Jones. Listen, I think that the issue here is that the city of New York is in the business of policing poverty. That's exactly what is happening here. What ACS people should be doing, or ACS workers should be doing, is going into these homes with a checklist and checking off the boxes of the resources that these families need, and then working to bring those resources to those families, not taking children away from mothers. That is the backwards way that we police poverty in this city, and it continues to be that way. ACS should be a support system, not an enforcement system. And I would, again, make sure that I use the bully pulpit to be able to bring attention to this issue. But also, in the city council, we passed legislation to stop drug testing pregnant women while they're giving birth, to use that as a way to take away their babies. What we found out is that the drug testing was happening almost exclusively in public hospitals to Black women. And that is exactly what continues to happen in the city, and we need to change it. And I will be the borough president that does that.
Thank you, candidate Reynoso. Now we're turning to you, candidate Simon, for your response.
Yes, well, I would agree with Ms. Council, and I certainly agree with Antonio with his view. ACS really takes a prosecutorial role in what it does. And I certainly have had clients where they were drug tested, they were African American, and they were drug tested during birth or right after birth for the purpose of monitoring that family. So we need universal child care. We need to provide support to families. We need to provide resources to families, and we need to provide job training.
She's
for
about
families.
to.
So those are because what's happening is women are really being left behind, and they're going to be more left behind as a result of COVID. So I would work on all of those issues.
Thank you. I'm sorry for that little interruption in the middle. We were listening and we got you. Thank you very much for your considerate response. And now, finally, we're going to hear from candidate Whitehead.
Yeah, well, to answer Anthony Jones' question, no, you cannot have anything of the 50 million because you've been the district leader in Brownsville too long and things got worse, not better. And getting back to what I want to say, the ACS has been acting like the police, and this is going to be incorporated into my parole reform, where that even the parole has been torturing the Black and brown community, just like ACS has. What I do want to do to leverage and balance because if we deal with ACS, we have to deal with the community as well. And I want to implement guaranteed income, where therefore the borough president can give a stipend to certain individuals that need it, cash in hand. There's something that Martin Luther King said. He said, I am not now convinced that the simplest approach will provide to be the most effective. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by a now widely discussed measure, the guaranteed income. Cash in hand clears a lot of this pain. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. So we are being mindful of the time, and I'd love to see everyone on the screen right now if we can get a grid, just so folks can see the people who've been participating and asking so many thoughtful questions tonight. This may very well be the final question. We're going to give each of you a minute to answer this. So I'm just personally interested in knowing, on a scale from Marty to Eric Adams, which has been the most recent serving borough presidents, where do you put yourself? What is going to be your management style should you get to occupy Borough Hall for the next 4 years? And furthermore, just to hone in on that question, the question you've all been getting, who's going to occupy the second position in your ranked choice ballot? So, candidate Cornegy, what's going to be your management style in Borough Hall, and who's going to occupy that second spot? You got to unmute. This is where it gets good. Yeah, unmuted.
Listen, my style is going to be very, very much like it's always been, to be a solutions-oriented and solutions-driven legislator. Imitation is the highest form of flattery, and there are in every single one of our former borough presidents, there are great things to glean from and expound upon. Most recently, our current borough president has been focused on healthcare and health issues. I'm going to expound on that, keep the healthcare, but also incorporate mental health as a part of my platform. So thank you.
And you've got 30 seconds to tell us who's going to occupy that spot on your ballot for not number 1, which I suspect might be your name, but who's going to go in the number 2 line?
I'm not certain yet.
When you're going to know? I got 20 seconds to harass you about it.
I won't know until I know. But thank you for asking.
And we won't know a moment until then. Thank you. We're going to move on to candidate counsel, who may actually give me a name of a person who might occupy the line below hers on the ranked choice ballot. But first, what's your management style going to be?
Well, I mean, I think, I don't want to compare myself to either Marty or to Eric. I think they've done an excellent job, but I think it's time for a woman's touch in Borough Hall. I think it's time for us to make history, not just for the sake of making history, but I think we need someone who has nonprofit experience, who's worked to solve the problems behind the scenes and can scale the experience that I have across the borough of Brooklyn. So ready on day one to do what needs to be done, ready to be the first mom in chief to bring some equity and level the playing field in the borough of Brooklyn. Now, who is going to be my number 2? I don't kiss and tell. But I think...
You ain't got to kiss him. You just got to fill in the bubble in the number 2 position.
Eeny, meeny, miny, I don't know.
All right.
I have a lot of respect for everybody that's running. Let me say that.
Yeah.
A lot of respect. I have relationships with Khari, Antonio, and I have a lot of respect for JoAnne Simon and all that she's done. I've known Rob for ever. So who my number 2 is? I'm still not going to tell you.
All right. It's just a big old love fest in the Zoom room tonight. But, it's a serious question being posed, and it's a serious decision as we march into ranked choice voting for the first time. So we're asking all of you to lead by example. And even if you're not going to disclose, at least think about what that ballot is going to look like when you step in. But to the point, what is your management style going to be? Borough president in waiting, perhaps? Edwards?
A listener and a facilitator, being a non-elected and really having to tour the entire borough and really have open conversation and open communications with every different community, you really understand that you're not alone in this process. And in order to really affect change, you have to be part of something greater. So I really, I'm going to look at listening to all of the issues like I have during my campaign and really facilitate the needs of the folks in Brooklyn. I mean, you talk about East New York to Brownsville to Bed-Stuy to Bushwick to Bensonhurst. There's so many people that have stuff to say and need someone to lead them. And so that'll be my style. My number 2, you know what? I mean, I guess since everybody else is not jumping out the window and saying it, I guess I got no choice too, because if I'm in JoAnne's district, she's my number 2. If I'm in Kim's district, she's my number 2. Antonio, so that's the way I got to run it, because that's the way to run a good campaign. Be the number 2 in somebody else's backyard.
You got a little bit of strategizing there. That was an insight into inside baseball and ranked choice voting provided to you by candidate Khari Edwards. So we're going to move on to Anthony T. Jones. You're a straight shooter. You've been giving it to us all night. So what's your management style going to be,
listen,
sir?
I like Eric Adams, but I just like the way Marty just came out to, and how he interacted with people. And he happens to be an Aquarius like me. So I like Marty Markowitz. When it comes to my second choice, people want us to be straightforward. They want us to be direct. They don't want, us guessing and jumping around. So I'd probably take Antonio Reynoso or Kim Council.
Thank you. His name is Anthony T. Jones, and he's a Aquarius?
I'm Aquarius, brother.
All right, moving on. You have candidate Antonio Reynoso, who's the first name mentioned to occupy the second line in a ranked choice ballot by another candidate. But more seriously, what do you envision your management style to be in the office, and who would occupy that spot for your vote?
So I want to, a little bit of the Marty Markowitz is always good. You want to cheerlead for Brooklyn and make sure people know that we are the center of the universe. And it's important that people know that Brooklyn is the best place in the world. So I want to do a little bit of that, but I also want to do like an Elizabeth Warren style plan for that. I'm a big nerd. I like plans. So that's the type of management style that I'm looking to do, is just use my wonkiness and my energy to really big up Brooklyn, which is the work that I want to do. And look, for my second choice, I would say this: I'm going to reciprocate. The Anthony Jones did a really good job today. I'm really proud of him, so I'm gonna show him some love. But there are 4 candidates on this screen that are going to be in my top 5. That's for sure. They're all on the screen.
Oh, all will be revealed on election day. Thank you for that answer. And now we're going to turn to candidate Simon. Give us some insight into your management style and that other question.
So I think that everybody will bring to it their skills and their experience and their personalities and their interests. I would take a page from at least 3 of the predecessors in this office. Howard Golden, who worked very collaboratively and with stakeholders in many ways, and was a real visionary in terms of the development of Brooklyn in the world, and really developing the beginnings of the commercial core. I would also, Barney Markowitz had a great way with people, and that is something that, I'm a very accessible legislator, and I think we have to cheerlead for our borough. It's the greatest place in the world. And Eric has done remarkable work when it comes to health. But the reality is that I will bring my substantial experience in the community, legal, and legislative areas. I am running to be Brooklyn's first woman borough president, but not just because I'm a woman, because I have the experience to do the job, and I'm looking forward to doing that. Thank you.
And you've definitely managed to not answer the question about who's going to occupy the second spot, but I'm sure you'll tweet about it as soon as this is over. I'm going to move on right now to candidate Lamor Miller Whitehead. What is your management style, sir? And the other question.
Well, my management style is to bring the people together. I think the Black and brown community, the Asian community, the Russian community, the Jewish community, we have all been separated. And I've shown and proven that I have a voice for the streets. I'm the only candidate that has brought the streets together with community. I know how to bridge the gap. And I want to bring my expertise of love and forgiveness. I will be the youngest borough president, and I take after Eric Adams. I'm his mentee. My father, Arthur Miller, was his mentor, and I'm going to be an Eric Adams on steroids, right? I've been with him 8 years, and I've seen what can be done, what he can do, and I'm not trying to fill his shoes because I have my own shoes. So Marty was cool, but Eric Adams was a boss. Eric Adams did what he needed to do for Brooklyn and opened the door for a young African-American man like myself. Now, as to my second, I'm going to tell you straight up, it's Whitehead only.
Okay, it's Whitehead and Whitehead only, the beginning and the end. So I would love to see everybody again if we can make that happen, because I think I got one more time, if my overlords will permit me, to ask you all a question. This is something that's been churning and churning. It's getting hot outside. The summer is here. The masks are coming down and we're wearing them responsibly. We're moving around. But the question goes to quality of life. What are you, as borough president, prepared to do about the nighttime fireworks that we experienced last year? It's an explosive question. Is it going to happen again? What are you going to do to make sure that Brooklyn sleeps?
First of all, clearly there was a pipeline of very expensive fireworks that we need to trace where it came from. Those fireworks that when we did Eric Adams and I had a big press conference about those fireworks and the expense that it takes. So we know that those weren't purchased by the communities that they were exploding in. We need to do a thorough investigation to find out how they got here, where they came from, who supplied them, so that we can cut that off in the past. I don't want to enforce on the people who actually were firing them, because we know that they came from somewhere else.
All right. There's some question about origin, but the question is, candidate council, how are we going to get some sleep?
No, I got to say, I agree with Councilmember Cornegy on this one, because it wasn't just Brooklyn and New York. There were Maryland people, there were people all over the Eastern Seaboard that were complaining about these fireworks. So we definitely have to find out where they came from. But again, we have to engage our young people. We gutted summer youth employment. We gutted all of these things. We have to find a way to keep our young people busy and occupied and have the hard conversations. Like, this is a quality of life issue, and we have to make sure that we're talking to them about
Candidate Edwards, is it going to be a sleepless summer?
No, I mean, and the thing is, we have to give our kids something to do. You know, the kids didn't have to light the fireworks if we kept them occupied during the day, or really give them an opportunity to express themselves in other ways. And I think the fireworks are just an example of frustration through COVID, through George Floyd. And what we really have to do is educate our kids and give them an opportunity to put their energy other places.
All right, we're going to turn to you now, Candidate Jones. It was about what could the borough president do to really quiet down the explosions?
It's going to be a sleepless summer, so prepare for it and get ready for it. But I think it's important that in terms of the Brooklyn Borough President, we need to disseminate the information out there through the community boards and through the district managers to encourage people within the community to have some concern in terms of the fireworks. We got to get people involved and understand that, listen, at a certain period of time, it just needs to stop. Now, we have to prepare for it, but, you know, we as a borough, we got to get the police involved.
Okay, Candidate Reynoso, what say you to the question of the fireworks in the summertime at night?
I definitely don't have the answer to that, and I agree with Mr. Jones that there will be sleepless nights in come July 4th. I want to be very careful with enforcement. The enforcement will happen unequally. It will happen in our neighborhoods that are black and brown, and our kids will be put in jail for some nonsense that will destroy their lives over one mischief. So I want to be very careful about how we do that. And it is about education and giving these young people opportunities, but don't think we can stop it.
Candidate Simon.
You know, there's no great answer to this question, but it is about leadership from the top. It is about the tone set by the borough president, working with the elected officials, working with law enforcement, and working with perhaps federal officials, because, you know, New York State does not have laws that allow for that kind of fireworks, right? They're coming in from other states. So this is interstate. We need to investigate, but we also need to help set a tone and encourage kids. I agree with Khari. It's about having something to do. We need to be about helping our kids.
All right, so is it too late, Candidate Whitehead? Are we just going to have to suffer through the non-silence this summer evenings?
No, I think we can silence it. But if we look at the statistics, me and my team did the statistics from 18 to 45 years old, 95% of Brooklynites didn't even know there was a borough president. So at the end of the day, there's a disconnect. And I'm the one that can connect with the younger community. So therefore, we can do what we need to do. And as far as the fireworks coming in, is the same way the guns is coming into the community. So once again, you get political answers and a politically response, but yet at the end of the day, there's no real answer. Let's stop lying.
Well, thank you all for being here this evening. We've run right up into our time, so I want to use the remaining few seconds we have to remind everyone that Friday, May 28th is the last day in New York to register to vote before the upcoming elections. Early voting begins June 12th, and the general primary is going to happen June 22nd. So we'll see you at the polls June 22nd, if not a moment before, in June 12th. Register to vote. We'll see you at the polls. Good night.